beautiful woods of Plym Bridge, just outside of Plymouth in Devon, there are majestic trees considered to be over 200 years old. Towering into the sky above, these trees lie in the vicinity of the trackbed of the old Plymouth to Launceston railway line. And like we humans, these almost ageless living things would have been around to see the beginning and the end of the Plymouth to Launceston Steam Railway. Whilst the Plymouth to Tavistock section of line opened under the name of South Devon and Tavistock Railway on the 21st of June 1859, the full 34-mile journey from Plymouth to Launceston followed some 6 years later. In 1865, on July the 1st, a special train hauled by South Devon Railway Hawk-class engines departed from Old Mill Bay Station in Plymouth, Devon on a maiden voyage to Launceston in Cornwall. Picking up another coach at Tavistock, the pioneer train hauled its way into Launceston, where it arrived in the pouring rain to enthusiastic celebrations. Thus, the Launceston and South Devon Railway was formally launched at a time when steam transportation was of a modern age, and every boy's dream was to become an engine driver. From its beginnings in 1865 to its demise in 1962, this branch line served the Devon area for 103 years. Linking Plymouth, Tavistock and Launceston as busy West Country towns, transporting passengers and freight through some of the most beautiful countryside and moorland in England. During its 103-year existence, the stations served by this greatly missed line assisted towns and villages with much-needed transportation and freight conveyance. From Yelverton, it was even possible to travel into the very heart of Dartmoor by steam train, after climbing the hills and tors to reach one of the highest stations in England, namely Princetown. There are many stories and tales to tell of the line since its beginnings in 1865, stories rich with characters and events that have become legendary. Books have been written, and locals and enthusiasts still remember with great affection the locomotives and the stations and halts served during its 103-year history. Sad though the demise of the line proved to be, there are today in 1995 rumblings of revivals of steam. The Launceston Steam Railway is already in existence, and as we shall see later, the Plym Valley section of line is undergoing a welcome resurrection, an exciting prospect for the future. Today in 1995, the thought of the gentle journey on a steam-hauled train from Plymouth to Launceston on the fringes of the great National Park of Dartmoor invokes many nostalgic memories, particularly of those who remember the line with great affection. Some 5 miles of the old trackbed are preserved today, with walkways and cycle tracks where ramblers and cyclists regularly take in the clear country air. In the quiet settings of these country walkways, it seems hard to imagine the regular sound of the pistons and smell of the smoke as the 3:10 p.m. from Plymouth thundered by in all its magnificence. The modern history of this line is indeed fascinating. On the 1st of January 1948, all railways in the UK were nationalised by the ruling Labour government, although many felt that this had already been accomplished during 1944, when the Big Four railway networks worked together effectively to enhance the movement of troops for D-Day. The motorcar gained popularity, and the availability of road fuel increased, and coupled with the nationalisation programme, this spelt the death knell for the Plymouth to Launceston line. On the 5th of March 1956, the branch line from Yelverton to Princetown was closed to all traffic, and whilst this was not due to the authoritative acts of the famous Dr. Beeching, who came in power in 1962, the closure of the Plymouth to Launceston line nevertheless drew ever closer. Despite protests and pleas from the supporters of the line, the British Transport Commission issued a statement in January of 1962.
The Commission have no alternative but to submit to the South West Transport Users Consultative Committee for their consideration a proposal to withdraw the passenger train service between Plymouth, Tavistock South and Launceston, withdraw parcel facilities from Marsh Mills, Tavistock South and Lifton, withdraw freight facilities from Carrollton, Siding and close the line for all purposes between Marsh Mills, Tavistock South and Launceston.
The story of the closure of the line became a legend, as some of the last scheduled trains failed to reach their destinations due to a severe blizzard in the Dartmoor area. A rescue plan had to be actioned to recover trains and passengers at Bickley and Tavistock South. So, 103 years after its jubilant launch and in dramatic style, the Plymouth to Launceston service ceased, leaving only trackbed and walkways on the path to remind us of how things used to be. Fortunately, however, it's not just the walkways that hold nostalgic memories of steam days on the line. Plymouth amateur cinematographer Reg Blackett took 16mm film in the 1960s, capturing images of many parts of the line with its engines and rolling stock. He even filmed part of the last journey on that legendary day in December of 1962. Whilst the images are not consecutive on our journey into the past and feature different trains at different times, they nevertheless capture the magic days of steam on the Plymouth to Launceston line and Yelverton to Princetown. In the 1960s, from Plymouth North Road Station, the train headed towards Tavistock Junction, passing Lyra engine sheds. By this time, Mutley, Lipson Vale and Lyra Halt stations had been closed to passengers. As the train left the main line at Tavistock Junction, the first of the stations on the branch line was Marsh Mills, where it passed under 2 limestone bridges, still in existence today, carrying road traffic from the Marsh Mills roundabout into Plympton, a suburb of Plymouth. The old station is still visible and is used today as a public walkway and cycleway. China clay goods traffic still passes through, and since the closure of the branch line in 1962, a level crossing has been added to the north of the station. This can still be seen today. A little way up the line is the Plym Valley Railway Company, who have recently acquired a charter to reopen the line between Marsh Mills and Plymbridge, with future sites on Bickley. As will be seen later on in the film, steam is already poised to make a welcome comeback on this stretch of line. Old Marsh Mills Station, although a branch line, had the distinction of having a 32-frame lever signal box to control the traffic from Tavistock Junction. And in 1939, with the outbreak of World War II, a new government complex was opened nearby, necessitating the construction of a new siding to Coypool. As the train moved down through the valley and Woodford Wood, it approached Plymbridge platform, opened in May of 1906, named after the old narrow granite bridge spanning the river immediately below the embankment. And like many of the constructions on the line, the Plymbridge platform was considered by some to be one of the least attractive, lacking character with its huge concrete slabs laid upon pre-stressed concrete members. Today, the area is a popular beauty spot, and often busy in the summer months. But in the days of the steam train, it was considered to be busier and packed with visitors and locals. Running almost parallel to the old track bed is the Leamore tramway, crossing the road by way of a wooden bridge. This old privately owned mineral railway employed horse-drawn traction plus gravity and steam from 1899 to 1947, and until the closure of the line in 1960, horses were used exclusively as the means of transportation of china clay and other minerals from pits and works on the southern slopes of Dartmoor to the quays in the port of Plymouth. But it excites the imagination to contemplate the imminent laying of track again to this beauty spot and the anticipated return of steam to Plymbridge in the near future. On into the Plym forest in winter and summer, the trains served the area faithfully, following much of the River Plym as it headed toward Great Shaw Wood via a series of viaducts. From the woods, the view changed to that of the lower slopes of Dartmoor and Bickley Station. Built to South Western Railway design and the epitome of a Devonian station, Bickley opened in June of 1859 and was a passing place with its two platforms wide apart to accommodate broad gauge track until 1892. It was used by locals and visitors to the area, and in later years the establishment of the HM Royal Marine bases in the area signalled increased business for the branch. Personnel, stores and equipment were regularly encountered from this station, and when the Marines went on leave, special trains were laid on from Bickley, often with 8 or 9 coaches, hauled occasionally by larger locomotives such as Granges or Castles. The station site today is privately owned, and the surrounding buildings have maintained their distinctive line-side character and appearance. An exciting prospect is the possibility of a future line to Bickley, although the forces of nature and vegetation have obscured much of the original looks. Viewing the remaining platforms today, however, there is that haunting feeling that at any moment a train will thunder into the station and grind to a halt with the screeching of brakes and a diminishing cloud of steam. Leaving Bickley Station, the train headed toward Ham Green and the viaduct of the same name, still standing today and spanning a tributary of the River Plym. As a public walkway, views of the surrounding areas from the viaduct are breathtaking and give some idea of the encounters of passengers as they travelled on through some of the most beautiful terrain in the days when the branch line was opened. Shaw Bridge platform opened in August of 1907 and was the stop for visitors to the lovely picnic spot of Shaw Bridge, just a half a mile away. Mention of the Woolworths trip to more mature citizens of Plymouth and surrounding areas will undoubtedly conjure up memories of a return train trip from Plymouth for just 6p on a holiday or summer Sunday before the war. In the 1950s, for just 9 old shillings return, you could travel from Plymouth to Shaw Bridge of an evening, returning at sunset with the aroma of steam to accompany you on your journey and end your day. The single platform was on a long curve, adequate to take longer branch trains, and had a fully staffed tea room until 1939. Today, the platform is still intact, and a further half a mile down the line you can still walk through the 308-yard long Shoal Tunnel. That is, if the thought of almost complete darkness and rumours of gruesome murders in the dark tunnel toward the turn of the century don't deter you. Before the train entered the tunnel from the Shoal Bridge platform end, it passed under the iron aqueduct which used to carry the Wheel Lopez Leat over the railway on its journey to Whomeavy Bridge. Clearbrook Halt opened later in the life of the branch line, in fact October of 1928, and was located and surrounded by the moorland village of Clearbrook, today one of the most unspoiled villages in Dartmoor. Until 1958, this small station, constructed of wood with a small waiting shed, was staffed by one of the young porters from Yelverton, who would walk down the track with a little ticket box and return to Yelverton on a later train. Today the old station site is in private hands, although a distinct image of the track bed still haunts the bottom of a beautifully tended garden overlooking the village of Clearbrook, with its distinctive viaduct, now impassable by train or man. And so on to Yelverton, which opened on the 1st of May of 1885 and was a popular place for day trippers in the 1930s and 40s, visiting the southwestern edge of Dartmoor. But these visitations declined during the Second World War, when an air base was constructed just west of the railway station. But at this time also it was not uncommon to see trains with up to 12 coaches in transit from Plymouth to Tavistock, filled daily with passengers escaping from the devastation of the night air raids on Plymouth, particularly during the vicious attacks of 1941. The following morning the trains would restore travellers to their home destinations, thus making Yelverton a very busy station on the branch line at that time. Today, like many other station sites, Yelverton is in private hands. Although Horrabridge first served as the junction station for the Princetown line, Yelverton later took over that role for the trip to Princetown in the very heart of Dartmoor, and enabled travellers to view the breathtaking beauty of the moorland whilst on a 10.5-mile track from Yelverton. Leaving on this branch line, the train encompassed a steep curve before heading for the picturesque station of Dowsland. From there, it ran on a high embankment to Burrator and Sheepstor, overlooking the Great Lake that serves as a reservoir for the Plymouth and Southern Moor area. After negotiating a steep gradient to over 1,000 feet above sea level, the train enters Ingrator Halt, followed by King's Tor. And finally into Princetown Station, 1,373 feet above sea level, the highest station in England. The film Shadows on the Moor, produced by Aarchive Films, explains in more detail the history and workings of the Yelverton to Princetown branch line. But our journey to Launceston continued on the main line from Yelverton, and as the train left the station it entered a long tunnel passing under the village of Yelverton and the moor and emerged towards the next stop after crossing a bridge on the main Plymouth to Tavistock road. Horrabridge Station, opened in June of 1859, was one of the busiest on the branch line, and even today is supposedly haunted by the ghosts of railwaymen shunting phantom wagons on the site. Horrabridge was a classic example of a country station with a steady flow of passengers and busy goods yard, with what seemed like an endless activity of shunting. In the early days, the station not only served as the junction for the Princetown branch, but gave lifeblood to Horrabridge village, which grew to meet it on its elevated site. Some of the old station buildings and a granary are still evident today, although now converted to private dwellings. And the station is not without its historical tales. For instance, it was reported that just before D-Day, during the turmoil of World War II, Montgomery, Eisenhower and Churchill, aboard a special train from Plymouth, were apparently shunted into a siding at this station to make final preparations for the invasion that changed the course of the war. Other famous characters of modern history appear to have visited Horrabridge, including even princes and kings. The days of the train, whilst physically almost without trace now, are still immortalised by some of the local residents who have given appropriate names to their homes, now built upon the old station site. Leaving Horrabridge, the train headed toward Harwood Plantation and across Magpie Viaduct, and further down the line, the Walkham Viaduct, considered to be one of the most spectacular of all of Devon's many viaducts, towering 132 feet above the River Walkham as it approached Grenefin. Whilst there was no station at this point, it was at Grenefin that one of the last down passenger trains ran into a snowdrift and was almost derailed on the 29th of December 1962. One of the busiest halts on the branch was just outside of Tavistock at Whitchurch Down, with an average of 50 passengers a day using the platform in its heyday. Opened in September of 1906, the local village had been ignored by GWR since the branch opened, and Whitchurch Down now became a favourite station for hikers and provided local commuters a convenient way to travel to Tavistock, thus swelling the income of the GWR, who recognised the profitability of this venture and were opening stopping places all over its system. Until 1956, the station was staffed by one porter who collected and issued tickets and kept the platform clean. Whitchurch Down was just 3 minutes away from Tavistock South Station, so named in 1949 to distinguish it from the Southern Region Station to the north of the town, and was the busiest station on the line. It also possessed the most complex section of over 1.5 miles of track layout for a rural station of its size, situated in the middle of a town divided by the River Tavy. The roof linking the two platforms, together with a very busy freight depot, made Tavistock South one of the most distinctive stations, and it had a charm and atmosphere all of its own. It was the focal point for the opening celebrations of the South Devon and Tavistock Railway back in the 19th century. Today, the appearance of the station area has changed dramatically, with industrial factories and offices now standing. Considering how busy the station was before the demise of the branch line, hardly anything now remains to remind visitors of those wonderful days of the GWR at Tavistock South. From Tavistock South, the line headed towards Lidford after passing Kelly College, a quarry and a sugar factory. It then extended toward Mary Tavy and Blackdown Station on its way to Lidford. At this point, the old Southern Region trackbed ran parallel to the GWR from a point near Peter Tavy, although on a higher bank. But Mary Tavy and Blackdown served only the GWR and have become one of the most derelict and overgrown stations of the entire branch line. Today, the site is in private hands with a very attractive private dwelling. On the peak of Brentor stands the famous church of St. Michael's de Rupert, some 1,100 feet up and dating back to 1130 AD. As one of Dartmoor's most famous landmarks, Brentor attracts visitors by the thousand, and the local village of Brentor for many years had its own station built and operated by the Southern Region. Whilst the GWR line drew very close to the Southern Region station of Brentor, there was no stopping place on the line, the next stopping place being Lidford, 700 feet above sea level, and enjoying the surrounding views of open rural moorland. This busy junction was the highest station on the branch, and in their day the staff served the interest of both the Southern Region and Great Western. Whilst the main passenger line from Plymouth to Launceston closed in December of 1962, the goods traffic remained on this line to Tavistock South until 1964. At one time, after the closure of this freight line, over 2 miles of old decaying goods stock could be seen on rusting rails, awaiting removal to a scrapyard. Around the turn of the century, it was rumoured that rivalry between the two companies, the LSWR and the SR, became fierce at Lidford Station. Staff from opposing engines were said to have slyly crossed the platform at night and doused the fires of their competition's engines with buckets of water in order to make the departure of their trains late and thus damage goodwill. Apparently, even fistfights often ensued. Talking to those who knew the line, this rivalry even today in 1995 persists amongst those who work the line, albeit in a more jocular fashion after a few pints of beer in the pubs and clubs of the area. Leaving Lidford on the last leg of the journey into Launceston, the line tracks the River Lyd to Lyderton, and a halt opened in 1938, having the distinction of being the last to be built by the GWR in Devon and Cornwall. Its erection was the result of pressure and requests from the farming community and country folk in nearby hamlets of the Lyd Valley and Longham Down. But after all the pressure to open the station by the locals, it was apparently little used by them during its short lifetime. The next station was Corriton, opened with the Launceston extension in July of 1885. It was a busy stop and until the 1950s fully staffed with a goods yard. When standing on the platforms at Corriton, many remarked that it was like taking a trip back in time, for the station seemed to have retained its 1920s character and refused to move with the times. Being a quiet country area, agricultural traffic was one of the main sources of activity at this station for most of its active life. Cattle were loaded here, and such was the volume of traffic at times that it was not unusual to see special goods trains with up to 20 wagons leaving Corriton hauled by any pannier or prairie tanks that Lara could provide. The station site is today in private hands, and the original platform is still clearly visible. The old station building has formed the basis of extensive renovations and the building of a superb private dwelling, retaining much of the character of the old buildings. Lifton was the penultimate stop before Launceston, and while the Plymouth to Launceston branch line closed in December of 1962, Lifton survived the closure, remaining as a terminus for freight and milk traffic serving the creamery there. The line was again reopened to Launceston in September of 1964. Around this time there was the story of the two GWR bridge inspectors who were commissioned to check all viaducts and bridges before the line officially allowed traffic to run again. Imagine their surprise when at the top of their ladders, carefully examining a bridge, they encountered an IVAC 262 tank approaching them at quite a speed, causing them to jump for their lives. They survived, but Lifton's fate was sealed and final closure took place in 1966. Leaving Lifton and just before reaching Launceston, the line crossed the River Tamar into Cornwall and onto the site of the former Launceston Southern Region Station, the GWR station having been closed in 1952 and used from then on for goods traffic only. Launceston Station, known as Launceston North from 1951, was situated deep in the valley of Kensey Vale in the ancient market town with its predominant castle. It remained opened until October 1966 to serve local trains including those from London Waterloo to Padstow on the southern region. Apart from being the terminus for the branch line from Plymouth, Launceston was prominent with freight traffic and shunting activity up to 14 hours a day at its peak. Today, an industrial estate together with this car park for the Launceston Narrow Gauge Railway adorn part of the old station site. This then was our journey, today forgotten in a maze of high technology and congested roads, but still remaining are the memories of a branch line that so many not only travelled on, but fell in love with and still shed a tear at the reminder of its death. No matter how much the hand of government or progress has been instrumental in the demise of steam, it has failed to put a complete end to a much-loved form of transportation. At Plymouth in Devon, for instance, at the Plym Valley Railway, there are welcome sounds, sights and smells of a great steam revival, as there is at the end of the line here at Launceston. Nigel Bowman of the Launceston Steam Railway Company heads an enthusiastic team of volunteers and workers on a narrow gauge railway system that transports travellers a few miles up the old Atlantic coastline that used to connect with Padstow but now terminates at New Mills. Opened in 1984, this narrow gauge railway system is now a major tourist attraction in Launceston demonstrating that at least in this area, steam is very much alive. Falmouth docks in 1986, and a 60-year-old working industrial engine is about to move to pastures new. Known as Number 3, it is the West Country's last working industrial steam locomotive and was due to cross the Tamer Bridge from Cornwall to the Plym Valley Railway for a refit, brush and trim and a new lease of life. Now in 1995, Number 3 has pride of place at Plym Valley and is poised to pull the first carriages from Marsh Mills to Plymbridge in the near future when the track has been fully laid. Despite many setbacks since its inauguration in February of 1981, a determined group of volunteers chaired by Bernard Mills enthusiastically await further legal developments to complete the track to Plymbridge and thus bring a working steam line to Plymouth in Devon. Known as the Impossible Line because it started life in a field and wooded hillside with what seemed like little prospects to pioneer a line through the woods, today the impossible has become a reality, as can be seen from these images. Apart from Number 3, the flagship engine of the Plym Valley Railway will be a Class 4 number 75079 and will be named City of Plymouth after its restoration in honour of the people of Plymouth who helped to acquire the locomotive from the Barry scrapyard. With work progressing on the Marsh Mill station site, the old Billicombe station house, once removed from its site on the Yelpton line just a few miles away, awaits reconstruction to enforce the authenticity of steam days. Even an old wooden bar from Mill Bay Station is in storage, where passengers from the ships docking at Mill Bay in days gone by enjoyed a drink whilst waiting at the station. Rolling stock includes a Metropolitan wagon and a number of old vans originating from Devonport Dockyard, some of which apparently appeared in the feature film Force 10 from Navarone. But sadly there have been many problems and setbacks, not to mention the constant fight forward amidst red tape and legal jargon that not only cost the earth but takes so long to effect. Regular vandalism plagues the association, and almost weekly volunteers paint and repaint wagons and carriages to cover the graffiti that is regularly applied. But despite all the setbacks, the line is working, and only a few more unresolved legal matters appear to hold the final laying of track to Plymbridge in abeyance. Once again, steam has returned to the old line, and there is an expectation of great things for the future. These images tell their own story.
Man in three? Okay, Dave, man in between.
The date is December the 29th, 1962. The place is Plymouth North Road Station. The event is the last journey of 5564, the 1040 Plymouth to Launceston via Tavistock South. One of the travellers was Colin Baston, at that time a 16-year-old with a great love for the branch line that he had known and travelled for most of his young life. Now, 33 years later, Colin recalls events of that last journey on a cold winter's day in December when a heavy blizzard hit Dartmoor and the surrounding area.
On the last day, there was a light fall of snow, and snow was lying on the ground, but no one expected what was to come. For in the early afternoon, a blizzard, the worst in the West Country for many years, in fact, almost the worst this century, started, and this blizzard was to cause chaos on the branch line. Trains carried on running despite the snow, and in fact, as far as the railway authorities were concerned, they were going to operate the full service that day, and celebrations were to be held at Tavistock station with frock coats, mourning, people with coffins, and various other celebrations to take place at the station.
And so the 29th of December 1962 has left its mark on history as a legendary day, the demise of the Plymouth to Launceston line, a day that so many remember with cautious enthusiasm.
In Keyham was a dockyard halt and a station at Mutley where you could bolt to do your shopping on the plane and catch the same train back again. Lines to Plympton and Plymstock through to Billicombe, Alberton and Yelpton too. You could even detrain quite near Marsh Mills or go up to Layham through the hills to Plimbridge and Princetown on the Dartmoor line, and nobody cared if they were not on time. In Cornwall too, although it's true there's a line still running down to Looe, most of the others have been axed, and there's not much left of those winding tracks which meandered from Helston to Gwynyer Road and Wadebridge to Bodmin, when it was the mode that if passengers were a few minutes late, train and driver stopped to wait. So draw up a puffer train petition. Lobby your MP for better conditions. We're living in an age of rush depending on a car or bus. Remember poor old Alfie Hoskins, who was bogged down in town at congested crossings, a man called Bizzick, who couldn't visit his sister Kay, and old Alice Mole, who wanted a return to Mill Bay. The answer is the local track. Why can't we have our branch lines back?
Just outside of Plymouth is Lyra Depot, which still serves the western region of British Rail. It is still a busy centre for modern locomotives and rolling stock. In a forthcoming production, with the aid of some unique archive movie footage, we will take a journey into the past and remember the days of steam at what was affectionately known by the locals as Lyra engine sheds.
visit our website for news about new productions that are on the way, and you can support my work on my Patreon page. Thank you.